Marcus wiped the tears from his 8-year-old daughter's cheeks as she climbed into their beat-up Honda Civic after another brutal day at school. The other kids had called her the janitor's kid again, their cruel laughter echoing in the hallways where he spent his nights mopping floors and emptying trash cans at Pinnacle Financial Tower. But what broke his heart wasn't the mockery, it was watching his bright, beautiful Emma slowly dim, her shoulders sagging under the weight of shame she should never have to carry. "Daddy, why do they have to be so mean?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble of their ancient car engine. Marcus pulled over, his calloused hands gripping the steering wheel as he fought back his own tears. He'd been asking himself the same question for months, ever since Emma started attending the prestigious private school on scholarship at the same building where he worked the graveyard shift, invisible to the very families whose children tormented his daughter during the day. "Sometimes, sweetheart," he said, turning to face her with eyes full of love and determination, "people don't see what really matters, but that doesn't mean we stop being who we are." What Marcus didn't know was that his words would soon be tested in ways he never imagined, and that the very building where he felt most invisible would become the stage for a transformation that would touch thousands of lives. 3 months earlier, Marcus had been just another face in the crowd of night shift workers at Pinnacle Financial. At 34, he'd been cleaning offices for 6 years, ever since his wife Sarah passed away from cancer, leaving him to raise Emma alone. The insurance money had long since disappeared into medical bills, and his dreams of finishing his business degree had been buried under the crushing weight of single parenthood and financial survival. But Marcus had something that money couldn't buy: an unwavering belief in the power of human potential and a gift for seeing light in the darkest places. During his rounds, he'd often pause at the conference rooms filled with motivational posters and business books, absorbing every word about leadership, success, and personal development. While others saw his job as beneath them, Marcus saw it as his PhD in human nature, watching from the shadows as deals were made, careers were built, and dreams were either realized or shattered. It was on a particularly cold February night that Marcus first encountered Sophia Chen, the 16-year-old daughter of Richard Chen, CEO of Pinnacle Financial. He found her sitting alone in her father's corner office at 2 a.m., mascara streaking down her face, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and crumpled college application essays. "Oh," she startled, quickly wiping her eyes. "I didn't know anyone was here. My dad said I could stay late to work on my applications." Marcus paused, recognizing the look of exhaustion and desperation he'd seen in his own mirror countless times. "You don't have to explain yourself to me, miss. I'm just here to empty the trash." But something in her eyes, a familiar mixture of pain and potential, made him stop. "You know," he said gently, "I've seen a lot of people work late in these offices over the years. The ones who succeed aren't always the smartest or the most privileged. They're usually the ones who learn that failure isn't the opposite of success, it's a stepping stone to it." Sophia looked up, surprised that the janitor was speaking to her with such insight. "Easy for you to say," she muttered. "You're not facing Stanford and Harvard rejection letters." Marcus smiled softly. "You're right, but I am facing something much scarier, raising a daughter in a world that judges her worth by my job title instead of my character. And let me tell you, that's taught me more about strength and persistence than any Ivy League education ever could." Over the following weeks, these chance encounters became a routine. Sophia would stay late, ostensibly to study, but really to escape the crushing pressure of her father's expectations and her mother's constant criticism. Marcus would arrive for his shift and find her there, and somehow their conversations became the highlight of both their days. Marcus shared stories of resilience from his own life, how he'd learned accounting principles by reading discarded financial reports, how he'd taught himself public speaking by practicing presentations to empty conference rooms, and how every rejection and setback had only made him more determined to show Emma that success wasn't about the job you held, but about the impact you made. Sophia, in turn, opened up about her struggles with anxiety, her fear of disappointing her parents, and her secret dream of becoming a teacher instead of following in her father's corporate footsteps. Marcus listened without judgment, offering insights that her expensive therapists had never provided. "You know what I've learned from watching your father and all these executives?" Marcus said one night as he cleaned around her study area. "The ones who last aren't the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who get back up with more wisdom than when they fell." "But what if I'm not smart enough? What if I really can't cut it?" Sophia asked, her voice breaking. Marcus stopped mopping and looked directly at her. "Intelligence isn't about knowing all the answers, Sophia. It's about asking the right questions and never giving up on finding solutions. I've seen you think through problems that would stump most adults. The only thing holding you back is your belief in yourself." Their unlikely friendship might have continued indefinitely in the shadows, but everything changed the night Richard Chen decided to work late and discovered his daughter deep in conversation with the janitor. "Sophia, what is this?" Richard's voice cut through the office like a blade, his expensive suit and commanding presence filling the doorway. "Why are you wasting time talking to the cleaning staff?" The humiliation that washed over Marcus was instant and overwhelming. He watched as Sophia's face flushed red, caught between loyalty to their friendship and fear of her father's disapproval. He was just, Sophia stammered. "Mr. Chen," Marcus said quietly, gathering his dignity around him like armor, "your daughter is an exceptional young woman. I was simply encouraging her to. I don't need a janitor giving my daughter life advice." Richard cut him off, his voice dripping with disdain. "Sophia, gather your things. We're leaving. And you," he pointed at Marcus, "stick to cleaning. That's what you're paid for." The next morning, Marcus received a call from building management. Several complaints had been filed about inappropriate behavior and overstepping boundaries. He was being transferred to the early morning shift, and a motion that everyone understood was really a firing in slow motion. But the worst part wasn't losing his job, it was watching Emma's face when he had to explain why they'd be moving again, why she'd have to leave her school, why their already precarious world was crumbling once more. "It's because I'm the janitor's kid again, isn't it?" Emma asked, her 8-year-old wisdom cutting straight to the heart of their reality. Marcus knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in his work-worn ones. "No, baby, it's because sometimes adults forget that a person's worth isn't measured by their job title, but by the content of their character. And our character is something no one can ever take away from us." What happened next would have remained a private family tragedy, lost among the countless stories of economic inequality and social injustice, if not for Sophia Chen's courage and determination. Despite her father's warnings to stay away from Marcus, Sophia couldn't forget the man who had seen her potential when everyone else saw only her failures. She began researching his background, using her father's company resources and her own determination to uncover a story that would shock everyone who thought they knew the gist of Janitor. Marcus Thompson had graduated summa cum laude from State University with a degree in business administration. He'd been accepted to Harvard's MBA program but had deferred to care for his ailing wife. He'd turned down multiple corporate job offers to stay by Sarah's side during her cancer treatment. After her death, he'd taken the janitor position not because he couldn't do better, but because it offered the health insurance and flexible schedule he needed to be a single father. But that wasn't all. Sophia discovered that Marcus had been quietly volunteering at the local community center for 4 years, teaching free financial literacy classes to immigrant families and single parents. He'd helped over 200 people start small businesses, navigate bankruptcy, and build credit. The testimonials she found painted a picture of a man who had touched countless lives, asking for nothing in return. Armed with this information, Sophia made a decision that would change everything. She compiled a presentation detailing not just Marcus's qualifications and achievements, but the profound impact their conversations had made on her life. She documented how his mentorship had helped her overcome her anxiety, improve her academic performance, and discover her authentic voice. Then she did something that required more courage than any 16-year-old should need to possess. She presented it to her father. The confrontation happened on a Thursday evening in Richard Chen's office. Sophia walked in without an appointment, her presentation printed and bound, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "Dad, I need you to listen to me, really listen." For the next hour, she spoke with an eloquence and passion that Richard had never heard from his daughter. She talked about Marcus's wisdom, his kindness, his ability to see potential where others saw problems. She shared how their conversations had transformed her from an anxious, failing student into someone who believed in herself again. "This man isn't just a janitor, Dad. He's a teacher, a mentor, a leader who happened to be pushing a mop cart instead of sitting in a boardroom. And you destroyed him because you couldn't see past his uniform to recognize his value." Richard sat in stunned silence as his daughter continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You always tell me that business is about recognizing talent and maximizing human potential. Well, congratulations. You just threw away one of the most talented people who ever worked in this building because you were too proud to see him clearly." The presentation Sophia had prepared was devastating in its thoroughness. She'd documented every piece of advice Marcus had given her, cross-referenced it with business leadership principles her father swore by, and demonstrated how a janitor with no formal training had instinctively understood concepts that corporate consultants charged thousands to teach. But the moment that broke Richard's professional facade was when Sophia showed him the video testimonials she'd collected from the community center. 23 people, ranging from teenage mothers to elderly immigrants, speaking through tears about how Marcus Thompson had changed their lives, how he'd believed in them when no one else would, how he'd given them tools not just for financial success, but for believing in their own worth. "This is the man you humiliated, Dad, the man you deemed unworthy to speak to your daughter. I've learned more about real leadership from him in 3 months than I have from a lifetime of your corporate seminars." Richard Chen had built his empire by being able to read people, to assess their value and potential with ruthless accuracy. But as he listened to his daughter and watched the testimonials, he realized he had made the greatest professional and personal mistake of his life. The next morning, Richard Chen did something unprecedented in his 30-year career. He publicly admitted he was wrong. The company-wide email was simple and direct. "Yesterday, I made a grave error in judgment that violated every principle this company claims to uphold. I allowed my prejudices to blind me to extraordinary talent and character. Today, I want to personally apologize to Marcus Thompson and ask him to consider a position more befitting his abilities." But Marcus's response surprised everyone, including Richard. When they met in the CEO's office at the same space where their confrontation had occurred, Marcus spoke with quiet dignity. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your apology, and I can see it took courage to make it, but I need you to understand something. I never took that job because I couldn't do better. I took it because it allowed me to be the father my daughter needed while still contributing something meaningful to the world. If you're offering me a position now because you're embarrassed by your mistake, I'm not interested." Richard leaned forward, genuinely curious. "Then what would interest you?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time, Richard saw the sharp intelligence and natural leadership that his daughter had recognized immediately. "I want to create a program that pairs corporate mentors with at-risk youth. I want to prove that wisdom and potential exist at every level of society, and that real success is about lifting others up, not climbing over them. I want to show kids like my daughter that their worth isn't determined by their parents' job titles, and I want to show adults like you that leadership can come from the most unexpected places." The Marcus Thompson Foundation launched 6 months later with Richard Chen as its primary corporate sponsor. The program paired business executives with young people from underprivileged backgrounds, but with a twist that reflected Marcus's core philosophy. The relationships were reciprocal. Executives didn't just mentor the kids, they learned from them too. Within 2 years, the program had expanded to 12 cities. The success stories were remarkable. A homeless teenager who became a software engineer, a single mother who started a catering business that now employed 30 people, a former gang member who developed a conflict resolution program used in schools nationwide. But perhaps the most profound transformation was in Richard Chen himself. Working alongside Marcus, he discovered that true leadership wasn't about commanding from above, but about serving from within. He began volunteering at the community center, teaching business skills to immigrants and single parents, finding more fulfillment in these Saturday morning sessions than in any corporate merger he'd ever completed. Sophia, meanwhile, had found her voice and her calling. She graduated high school as valedictorian, but instead of Harvard Business School, she chose education, earning her teaching degree and returning to work with at-risk youth through the foundation. Her father, who had once been devastated by her rejection of the corporate path, now beamed with pride as he watched her impact young lives. The ripple effects continued to spread. Emma Thompson, no longer the ashamed janitor's kid, had become a confident young woman who understood that her father wasn't just a janitor, he was a man who had chosen service over status, impact over income. She volunteered alongside him at the foundation, already showing signs of the leadership and compassion that had always been the Thompson family legacy. The story might have ended there, as a heartwarming tale of personal transformation and social justice, but the universe had one more surprise in store. 3 years after the foundation's launch, Marcus received a call that would change everything once again. Harvard Business School had been following the foundation's work and wanted to offer him something unprecedented, a full professorship in their new social impact leadership program, with the opportunity to teach MBA students about authentic leadership and the power of servant leadership. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who had once been deemed unworthy to speak to a CEO's daughter was now being invited to teach future CEOs about the very principles he'd been living all along. Marcus's first lecture at Harvard was standing room only. Word had spread about the janitor-turned-professor, and students, faculty, and business leaders packed the auditorium to hear his story. He began simply, the way he always did, with truth. "My name is Marcus Thompson. For 6 years, I was invisible to most of you as a janitor who cleaned your offices, emptied your trash, and listened to your conversations about success and leadership. Today, I want to share what I learned during those years of observation, and why the most important leadership lesson you'll ever learn might come from the someone you never thought to notice." The lecture was transformational. Marcus didn't just teach business principles, he taught humanity. He showed them that leadership wasn't about position or power, but about service and sacrifice. He demonstrated that wisdom could be found in the most unlikely places, and that the measure of success wasn't what you achieved for yourself, but what you made possible for others. Richard Chen was in the audience that day, sitting next to Sophia, who was now completing her master's degree in education. As they listened to Marcus speak, they reflected on how much their lives had changed since that night in the office when pride and prejudice had nearly destroyed something beautiful. After the lecture, as students crowded around Marcus with questions and praise, Richard approached his former janitor-turned-professor. "You know," Richard said with a smile, "I used to think I was pretty good at spotting talent." Marcus laughed, the same warm laugh that had first drawn Sophia to trust him years ago. "You just needed to look in different places, Mr. Chen. Talent isn't about credentials or titles. It's about heart, determination, and the willingness to serve something bigger than yourself." As they stood together in that prestigious Harvard lecture hall, surrounded by the next generation of business leaders, both men reflected on the journey that had brought them there. It had started with a chance encounter between a janitor and a troubled teenager, continued through humiliation and redemption, and culminated in a friendship that had changed not just their lives, but the lives of thousands of others. The story of Marcus Thompson reminds us that greatness often wears ordinary clothes, that wisdom can be found in unexpected places, and that the most profound transformations begin not with grand gestures, but with simple acts of kindness and recognition of human dignity. In a world that too often judges worth by wealth and status by salary, Marcus's journey stands as a testament to the revolutionary power of seeing people for who they truly are, not what they appear to be. His legacy lives on not just in the foundation that bears his name, but in every life he touched, every person he believed in, and every heart he opened to the possibility that we all have something valuable to contribute to this world. The janitor who was once laughed at for coaching a CEO's daughter had become exactly what he'd always been: a teacher, a leader, and a living example of what happens when we have the courage to see past the surface to the extraordinary potential that exists in every human being.